Oh, I am? Okay. I didn't see a thing run or anything. So, okay. So let's open a word of prayer. Sorry, we're switching mics out here, so things are a little bit more chaotic than usual. So let's pray. Lord, thanks for the day. We pray that you'll bless our time together and pray that you'll always help us to remember that you're in control of everything and that you are preparing us and you're allowing us to live in a very special time. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. So here is my new title slide. We need to have a chat. And I also have a disclaimer down here that I decided that I needed to add because of ChatGPT. So generative AI was not used in the research or preparation of this update. So just, so we can't blame anybody. It's all on us. So we talk about the convergence of the signs, the things that are happening. Let me give you just sort of a little update on some upcoming things. I did do, it was on Tom Hughes' Hope for Our Times last Monday. If you want to check that out. Stand Up for the Truth with David Fiorazo is on there on Tuesday. This Tuesday at, I think, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be live with Pablo, my friend Pablo, on Serpents and Doves. I can't remember, he calls it something with a hand in it. I can't remember the name of the, offhand maybe, I think it is. And then next Sunday, I'm going to be doing something with the Goslings, I think. And then in early May, Last Days Bible Conference in Calgary, Canada, ldbc.ca. I don't know if registration is open yet. In June, the weekend of June, I think 18th, Sunday the 18th, and a couple days leading up to that, I'll be doing a Moriel conference. And I believe that's going to be in the Scottish Highlands someplace. I know I'll probably get there eventually. I'm not sure exactly where it is. You might check Moriel.org to see if that information's listed yet to register for that. And I think there's also one church I'm going to be doing maybe down in England, in the UK, around either before or after that conference. So that's some things coming up. So interesting times. We talk, again, just sort of my grid that I use: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. I think this is one of these times where, Lenin said this, and not that Lenin's a great source, but there are decades where nothing happens. There are weeks where decades happen. Even like this is a Canadian website called Exploring Biodigital Convergence. And this stuff is happening. So we're in this time. And so there's a lot of controversy. Are we in the SEALs? Are we not? We're in the SEALs. We're not in the SEALs. The SEALs happen here. The SEALs happen now. I'm just going to say is I follow a lot of different people. I mean, I just sort of check in on them just to make sure that I'm not getting out into crazy land all by myself. In which I find out that they're all often crazy. No, they're not. They're not. Some people are. But, and we get, there's such a controversy over Bible prophecy. There certainly is not unity in the body of Christ over this. And so I think there's a number of us who were trying to work through these issues, understanding that this passage in Daniel, and I did a whole sermon last Sunday on this, that as we get closer to the end, things are going to become more apparent. I even had people comment to me that, there's nothing prophetic happening now. We're in a pause. So until the church is out of here, nothing's going to happen. Now, I'm not sure how to describe how I feel about that kind of a statement without being very pejorative and sounding condescending. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't agree with that statement at all, because we're going to see these things begin to come together. And we want to be that. So let's look at some of the things that went on this week and understand, we put them in the context. We always look at the passages in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy that, in the latter times, perilous times will come. People will fall away from the faith. And then people in the culture will have these characteristics of that best described as they're very selfish and they're only acting in their own best interest. We also understand that there's a technological system that's coming that's going to put in this mark of the beast thing. Now, I don't think that is implemented until after the abomination of desolation. I think that's what the way Revelation is constructed. But that doesn't mean that the foundational part of that's the logistics part of what I talk about, is not going to be in place. And so there are a lot of things to be concerned about. So, and I listened to a lot of different podcasts this week. I listened to a lot of different views from libertarians who are all excited about artificial intelligence. I even saw an article title. I can't remember where the article was, but there was some guy who was saying, oh, it's all you crazy, premillennial dispensationalists. They're going to get Christians not using AI, and that's just terrible what you're doing because you're afraid of it, and we're going to build this great. Listen, I am concerned about it. When you sit down and think through it, it's frightening. And if everybody in the world was a good, solid Christian person, I wouldn't have any problem with it. But guess what? They're not. And guess what? They're not going to be, by and large. I see a lot of problems. I listened to a number of podcasts this week to talk, and I'll try to incorporate some of that in my talk. But let's just talk about this. Now, I'm going to exercise mercy. I'm not going to play a single clip from the State of the Union. So you can go watch that mess if you want. For a while there, I thought it was President Trump up there giving a speech, the way Biden was talking about things. And things are so weird. I mean, there's a clip, you can find it on Twitter. Just look at Kamala Harris. What was going on with her neck? Have you seen that video? Go look it up on Twitter and just type in Kamala SOTU, State of the Union. And I don't know what's going on. I mean, there are so many weird things. And I don't even have any slides on all the things that we keep shooting out. We never had any of these things before. Now we have, all these weather balloons and unidentified objects that we're shooting down, and they appear to be balloons. Some have this, some have technology, some don't. Some have their own way to sort of guide them through the atmosphere and that sort of thing. And I personally think they're Chinese balloons to gather surveillance, and they're testing out our defenses. And now one thing we learned this week is that our F-22s are able to go up there to at least the height that these balloons and other objects have been at so far and shoot them down with a $400,000 missile. So maybe we could invest in some giant pens to just pop those balloons. I think there's technology for that, just take a small pen and make it really big. And then attach an engine to it, and you got the problem. The other problem, though, is that, we humans, we sort of survive in this kind of narrow band around the Earth. And even our fighter jets, if the balloons were much higher, we wouldn't be able to get them. Okay, it's like you don't send a jet up and knock down a satellite. We don't have the technological capability to do that. And lasers aren't ready yet. There's talk about missiles, and they're going to, Russia's threatening to nuke us, and there's no missile defenses anywhere. There's not on intercontinental ballistic missiles. That is, and even the hypersonic missiles. There's laser technology being developed. Some people think it's there. I haven't seen any indication that it is, and that's a ways off. But this was what happened. This is, I don't know if this is Chuck Schumer or one of the other Democratic senators. They didn't wear flag pins like most American Congress people will do for the State of the Union, because it's a patriotic thing. You go in there and where the House and Senate meet together, and you get all the government leaders. And by the way, there's a sign up there that says, "In God We Trust." And so what did a lot of the Democrats wear this year? Was they wore not a flag, but this pin. And look at the first O. We love abortion. So this is from National Review. Dissatisfaction with U.S. abortion policy hits record high, according to a report. What it says here at the bottom is just a quarter of American adults surveyed are content with prevailing abortion policies. And as conservatives and Christians, we would say, well, that's great. We're not content with them either. We don't like this. But listen to what the rest of this says. While nearly half of Americans want less strict laws, the growing, the growing unease is driven by nearly 3/4 of Democrats wanting more relaxed policies, alongside 50% of women expressing a similar statement. So when I went to that Fox panel in the debate, that was what the Democratic and left-leaning people on the panel were talking about. They were talking about climate change, and they're talking about abortion policy, because the Supreme Court had come out with the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade. And I'm just telling you, for now, the argument is by and large lost. I mean, you go to Kentucky, you go to Kansas, you go to some other states that you would think would enact reasonable restrictions, and they're not. And this is not good. Eventually God's going to say, enough of this, okay? I'm going to judge you. Now, how does that happen? A lot of different opinions on how that happens. But, and China, listen, China's did 500 million abortions. 500 million by most estimates. And what's happening to them? Well, part of the judgment, I think, is their country is collapsing demographically. Now, a lot of people in Bible prophecy, they never talk about that. And it's not like tomorrow they're not going to be any Chinese. It's going to take a while. But I think the collapse in certain demographic populations that are involved in geopolitics is going to have a big impact, because they're going to say, we want to preserve our legacy. Believe me, listen, we have a lot of evil, narcissistic people running countries now. I would put Xi of China there. I certainly would put Kim of North Korea there, and I would put Putin there. And there are others. You can line the list up. It's pretty long. Those people want to have a legacy. I spent several hours on the phone this week with a friend that I made a couple months ago. He is a pastor in Ukraine. I'm not going to identify him, but I talked to him about what's the war like. I mean, what's going on? What's your perception? And he's Ukrainian, so he's going to come from the Ukrainian perspective. But one question I asked him is, in this war, I have heard reports that Russians are kidnapping Ukrainian children and taking them to Russia and adopting them to Russian parents. He said that's true. It's in the tens of thousands in the last year. Now, part of that is this is not uncommon. This has happened before in the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. It's not unusual. And there's been atrocities back and forth on both sides, and people have done this and that type of thing. But I got a little bit different perspective on some things. For example, did you know that the largest population of Jews in any country at the start of World War II was Ukraine? Now, why was that? Because the Russian Orthodox Church has been anti-Semitic and had driven the Jews out of Russia. And even when the Jews made Aliyah from Russia, from the collapsed Soviet Union to Israel, they had to go to Ukraine to get a boat or a plane to go to Israel. So factor that in. There's, and I know whenever I say this, oh, you're pro-Ukrainian. No, you know what? I don't want people dying over there. And we're on the cusp. I'll talk about it in just a minute. It's going to be very, very bad over there very, very soon. Very bad. And the description of some of the brutality from my pastor friend that has gone on across Ukraine has been, it's pretty bad. And look, our conduct has not been good. You know, there's a big article this week about the U.S. blew up Nord Stream 1 and part of Nord Stream 2. And I don't know, I've seen proof that, yeah, it sort of indicates that the United States or somebody operating in the anti-Russian camp had done it or did that. Now, they were not operating at the time they were blown up. So Nord Stream 2 had never started. So there's a lot of factors there to consider. But there's an article out there by Seymour Hersh, and you can look that up. And he did a pretty good job, although I think sometimes I think of this in my trial lawyer mind, you know, let me cross-examine him a little bit about his article, just to test out, and it may hold up, okay? But I just have a few questions, but I'll never get that chance. I'm going to talk about this too. This is from National Review. I'll talk about this in just a moment. Trans and teens, the social contagion factor is real. This thing with transgender identification has exploded. And so I think when you see this one on abortion and you see this one on the transgender thing, these are all connected, and they show a moral depravity. Speaking of moral depravity, I'm not going to show you any of the pictures from the Grammys the other night. But you probably have seen them. They're easy to find. Sam Smith and a trans person, I think it was, I don't know. I don't even know what to call these people like this anymore, okay? Because I don't know where they started. So there was a trans person, and Madonna got up there. Madonna, if you're looking for, I can refer you to an attorney to sue your plastic surgeon because they really did a job on you. But she looked like that statue that I talked about last week. Did I talk about this last week? I don't remember. The statue they erected in New York City on a government building that has the hair and strands like this. Go look at a picture of Madonna at the Grammys and that statue and tell me there's a difference. There's not. She looks like the same. And that statue apparently was erected to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's an idol. It's an idol. And so the people that would support that wore the abortion pens with a little heart in the abortion. And I think that heart is not to represent the little heart that they rip out or take out and sell to somebody, like at the University of Pittsburgh and that program that they had there. But it means they love that. And that speaks volumes about a culture that's really lost its way. Even we talk about academic freedom and that type of thing, and there's this big push for DEI. And this is an article from The Economist, which is hardly a conservative magazine of any kind, but they're concerned about academic freedom. And they were going through this example after example that they cite in this article where it says that we want your resume, we want your CV, we want how you're educated. If you're applying for a faculty or leadership position at a university, and even in the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, medicine, even in the STEM courses or parts of universities, they want people that are dedicated to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you have to tell how you're going to do this. So it's no longer whether you're qualified, it's whether you can satisfy the leftist agenda that we've put in place. And so even a magazine like The Economist comes out and says, this seems to be getting out of control. Well, it doesn't seem to be. It really is out of control. And of course, then they have this little, in the article, I think it was in this article, they cite Erwin Chemerinsky, who is the left-wing dean of used to be at Harvard. Now he's at Cal Berkeley. Talk about, well, we just really want to know what people are going to do with this. And it's just, and Erwin's kind of a smart guy, but what does it say in Romans chapter 1? Thinking themselves to be wise, they became fools. They've really lost the ability to reason. Their reasoning is futile, I think it says in Romans 1:21. This is the Church of England. I have a number of videos that I could play for you, but again, I'm going to exercise mercy. They had the Anglican Church in England had a big meeting about, are we going to bless same-sex unions? So Welby, the head, the Archbishop Welby, came out and said, well, I'm not going to take a position on it, but I think we should do this. And of course they did this. They're going to bless same-sex marriage. This is an article from the Times, though, saying one of the prior leaders, most senior clerics of the Church of England, has come out and said, this is out of step with the Bible. This is not right. You're also going to see more weaponization of agencies and companies against conservatives. It's just assume that it's coming. This is a FBI whistleblower from the FBI, Nicola Parker, who was testifying in Congress this week. Listen to what she says. She came out and said, she'll tell you about the FBI.
Participating in the investigations of myriad criminal cases. The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting in Parkland, Florida. The 2017 Fort Lauderdale airport shooting. The Caesar Sayoc pipeline case. Multi-million-dollar Ponzi schemes, crimes on the high seas, bank robberies, murders for hire, sexual assaults, extortions, and more. Yes, it was physically taxing and emotionally jarring, but I believed I was making an impactful difference. And every day I woke up and I embraced being an FBI special agent until things changed. Over the course of my 12 plus years, the FBI's trajectory has transformed. On Bureau, the Bureau's mission remained the same, but its priorities and governing principles shifted dramatically. The FBI became politically weaponized, starting from the top in Washington and trickling down to the field offices. Although FBI employees have their First Amendment rights, they are not at the liberty to allow their personal political views or preferences to determine their course of action or inaction in any investigation. Lady Justice must remain blind. Those that do not uphold these responsibilities cause a negative ripple effect throughout the agency in the field. It's as if there became two FBIs. Americans see this, and it is destroying the Bureau's credibility, causing Americans to lose faith in the agency, and therefore the hardworking and highly ethical agents who still do the heavy lifting and pursue noble cases. It makes it very difficult for agents to do their job when the FBI loses the...
So she goes on and testifies that, listen, the FBI has completely changed. It's not the agency that it was, and it's being weaponized. And we've seen all the Twitter files, and they had all the Twitter people there testifying in front of, I think it was in front of Jim Jordan's committee this week in the House. And they're just, I'm sorry, they're lying. They're lying through their teeth about what they did. And so I watched some of the, like MSNBC and CNN, and they say, well, it was Trump. Trump did it. Trump was the one who wanted to censor everything through Twitter. And Twitter, we just want people to, we just want to have an open platform. They're lying. Here's an example of one. This is a lady named Lauren Southern. I don't know if you've seen any interviews with her. I think she was on some of the Fox shows this week. She's a conservative. I think she's from Canada. She's conservative. She puts up videos and she goes after the left. Fine. We applaud that, right? We're open-minded here. I don't mind people get up to go after the right, to be honest with you. as long as it's open and fair and everybody has a chance. So she puts up these videos. Well, then she gets an email from Airbnb and says, you're violating our acceptable conduct standards. Therefore, you cannot make a reservation through Airbnb at all. And if you have made a reservation, we're going to terminate the reservation, and eventually we'll get around to returning the money to you. You're done with us. Now, listen, that is the very definition of corporate fascism. Okay, so they will complain about the right, but I don't know anybody on the right that's conducting their business that way. I don't think Chick-fil-A is going out there and say you support abortion. You can't order a chicken sandwich from us. Get out of here. And so this is the beginnings of the social credit system. But Airbnb went one step further. They went one step further, and you can see this in here, is anybody in a close relationship with you. They banned her parents, who have nothing to do with her YouTube channel or anything like that. And then maybe they support her. It's their daughter. I assume they love her. They banned her parents. Well, they're not banned now because Airbnb got a lot of negative press over this, and they should. By the way, do you know who the director of public policy is at Airbnb? It's a guy named Jay Carney. Jay Carney was the press guy for Barack Obama for several years. You remember him. What was that other guy's name? Josh something? That replaced him later on. I thought Josh, what a name for a guy who's Obama's press secretary. Just joshing, whatever. But Jay Carney, I mean, he's the guy, this had to go through him. Had to do this. Here's a front page thing from the Daily Mail. Now even God could be going gender neutral. Church of England to debate whether to stop referring to the Almighty as He. And there's a big article there talking about what are they going to do? We're going to change the liturgy and that type of thing. And a lot of the people in the Church of England, I hesitate to call them pastors or priests or whatever, they say, we really need to do something about this. This is not inclusive, and it's damaging to people. And even I think the Daily Mail came out, said, well, here's what their editorial said. In the name of inclusion, the Church of England may start referring to God using non-gendered language, including dropping the masculine pronouns he and him from liturgies and removing the words our Father from the Lord's Prayer. So what do they do with this phrase where Jesus said, my Father and I are one? Uh-oh. Guess we're going to change that. Could this kind of risible, politically correct posturing, which breaks with centuries of religious tradition, have anything to do with a catastrophic decline in Anglican congregations? And the answer is, yeah, it does. Here's more. There's another article from the Times of the UK on the gay marriage debate, and Welby, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to take a position, but I support it. Essentially what he said. And I listened to several videos of people who were giving statements in support of it, blessing same-sex unions. And I'm telling you what, if I had to, I was trying to find a graphic for word salad, because it was just like this, it was like somebody just mixed a whole bunch of words up and spoke them randomly. It didn't make any sense. So I'll talk briefly about, here's my Airbnb slide. This is Jay Carney, who you might remember him from his days in the White House. That's the guy who head of public policy at Airbnb. So let me talk a little bit about, I'll talk about this. Remember this Chinese scientist who was trying to use CRISPR on babies, on embryos and that type of thing. Well, he's finally come out and said, maybe I got a little bit out of control. Well, that's a little bit late. And so when I look at the development of artificial intelligence and things, I'm concerned about a lot of things that I'm seeing. So Google has come out this week with it's called generative artificial intelligence. You put in search terms and that type of thing. So Google's is called Bard. And it had some problems on launch, but it's based on Lambda, which if you might remember the report that I gave maybe a year ago, they had some crazy new age guy in charge of this program at Google. And he came back and said that in researching and working with this chat bot, it was actually thinking through problems that it hadn't been trained to think through. It was sentient, they said. It's taking on almost human form. And I listened to, like I said, a number of podcasts. I don't endorse everything that he believes in, so take it with a grain of salt. Glenn Beck did a couple great programs on, I think, Wednesday and Saturday with people talking about artificial intelligence, some of which they talked about some of the great things that are going to happen, but then they talked about the disruptive thing. And one of the examples that came up was, well, I have a friend who's 20 years old, and he wants to know what's going to happen with this ChatGPT, and it can write software code, and it's at the stage right now. This has just been released. It gets about 80% of the way done, just on its own, on programming and that sort of thing. And so the guys, so I think it was Glenn Beck or the guest said, well, ask a 20-year-old, well, what are you going to do with your life? Well, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to study computer programming. Then they started talking about that, and they said, it's probably going to do almost all computer programming in 5 to 7 years. So it doesn't seem like so you're going to go to college for 4 years, and you're getting out, you're going to have maybe 1 year to do what you went to college to learn. It's going to be very disruptive. This brings back what the clips I played over and over of Yuval Harari at the World Economic Forum a number of years ago saying, what are we going to do with people when there's nothing for them to do? There's no economic value. There's nothing they bring to the table. And it's concerning. Now, listen, I suppose it wouldn't be concerning if we didn't have people in charge who had killed 65 million babies in the United States for convenience. That sort of seems to me to be, maybe I shouldn't trust you on how you're going to handle me when I don't really have anything to add to society. And who are you to say that I don't have anything to add to the society in the way that I interact with my children or grandchildren or great nieces or great nephews in our case? Who are you to say that? Well, you teach at a church. That's all you do? Well, the FBI field office in Richmond is doing a lot of damage control now because there was a memo that got leaked to the press about how they were going after traditional Catholics. The ones that like to say the Mass in Latin. Now, I'm not supporting that, other than that they should have the right to do that in America. But the FBI say those people are like terrorists. There was an article last year in The Atlantic that said the rosary, some conservatives use the AK-47 as their terrorist symbol, and others use the rosary. That was The Atlantic, a supposedly respected magazine. I have the articles. It's hard to believe that we're at this stage. So in this artificial intelligence, now Microsoft has come out. They've invested a lot in OpenAI. They put a $10 billion investment in there, but they came out with their version of it this week, a revised search engine for Bing. And people that I've talked to and listened to have said it's actually really good. And so Google is having a meltdown internally because what are we going to do? Because we've had a corner on the market, and now here comes Bing. It's getting very good very quickly. The numbers are this. When I was in Israel in early December, ChatGPT 3, we'll just call it ChatGPT, had just been released the end of December or end of November. And by the time we were sitting there in a business session at the Christian Media Summit in Jerusalem, it had 1 million downloads. Fastest to 1 million of any app in the history of apps. So that was December 10th. So what is it 2 months later? 130 million. And they expect it within the next few months to hit 1 billion users. Now, it takes a lot of computer power to do this, and so things are kind of slow, but you can sign up for a premium service now for $20 a month. So let's say out of the 1 billion users that they'll have in a couple of months, let's say that 10% of those pay the $20 a month. So so they would have 100 million users paying $20 a month. So what's that, $2 billion? Is my math right? I don't usually work in those numbers. I'm more like, when can I get the cheap tea time? That's my, but so this company could generate $25 billion a year in revenue pretty easily. That's a lot of money. That gives you a lot of power. And that's $25 billion a year roughly in revenue. It's going up. It's very concerning. Then there's another thing out. Oh, that's the FBI article. I heard about this week. I didn't know anything about it. This thing is called DeepMind AI, and DeepMind's been around for a while, but now what they're doing is and it's hard to even get your head around what they're doing is they're programming robots using artificial intelligence, and they're giving them some basic information, but the robots are going beyond what they're trained to do. They're thinking through the problems. And so there's some research that's out about that, and they call it reinforcement learning. Not perfect yet, but we're like at the beginning we're at the edge of the cliff. We haven't gone over it yet. And this is from that website on DeepMind. This is sort of what they view as going on. And that's not, it kind of looks like what you would see in a nightmare. And then we talk about what's happening. So the EU right now is complaining that Elon Musk's Twitter lacks an appetite for censorship because they don't care about that. And what happens with these big tech companies is the government threatens them or enacts a law in Europe that's very restrictive, that they have to censor things. And so the tech company, they're going to do it. They're going to do it here. They're not going to separate what's going on in Europe from what's going on in the United States. And the control is there, but the Twitter people were there, and it was clear from the hearings in Congress this week. What's her name? Brobert Lorraine from Colorado. She was really going like, you banned me. How dare you? Why? Who do you think you are? And they just acted like there was nothing wrong with it. And nothing's going to happen. By the way, nothing's going to happen to these people right now because they're working with the FBI and the Department of Justice to do this. And so nobody in the Department of Justice is going to prosecute them. There's nothing going to happen to them except being exposed for what they really are. I'm going to just read a couple quotes from an article. Now, the Global Risk Report and at the World Economic Forum, they talked about the polycrisis. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I used that not because I thought of it, but I used that back in October, that term. And then everybody got all excited when Klaus Schwab talked about we live in the edge of the body crisis. But I had read an article, this was from the Financial Times, and this was dated October 29th. So the day before I did this update, I read this article, Welcome to the World of the Polycrisis. And listen to some of the quotes from this. So it's this guy said, and I don't remember if I read this article at the time, but I came across it again because the term polycrisis keeps coming up. Pandemic, drought, floods, megastorms, and wildfires, threats of a third world war, how rapidly we have become inured to the list of shocks. So much so that from time to time it is worth standing back to consider the sheer strangeness of our situation. As former U.S. Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers recently remarked, this is the most complex, disparate, and cross-cutting set of challenges that I can remember in the 40 years that I have been paying attention to such things. And I would say, welcome to my world, where we talk about this all the time. With economic and non-economic shocks entangled all the way down, it is little wonder that an unfamiliar term is gaining currency, the polycrisis. A problem becomes a crisis when it challenges our ability to cope and thus threatens our identity. In the polycrisis, the shocks are disparate. They interact so that the whole is even more overwhelming than the sum of the parts. Do you ever feel like this when you watch things going on in the world? It does get overwhelming. It's like, okay, can we just take a break for a while? At times, one feels as if one is losing one's sense of reality. Is the mighty Mississippi really running dry and threatening to cut off the farms of the Midwest from the world economy? Did the January 6 riots really threaten the U.S. Capitol? Are we really on the point of uncoupling the economies of the West from China? Things could have once seemed fanciful are now facts. That's why I titled this. We need to have a chat. Former European Commissioner President Jean-Claude Juncker, to whom we owe the currency of the term polycrisis, borrowed it in 2016 from the French theorist of complexity, Edgar Morin, who first used it in the 1990s. As Morin himself insisted, it was the ecological alert of the early 1970s that a new sense of overarching global risk entered public consciousness. Now, a lot of that narrative falls apart all the time, but it doesn't make any difference because it seems like one thing goes away and another thing comes back. So now we have balloons all over the place, unidentified flying objects. We have our F-22s. By the way, the F-22s, it's the first kills that they've gotten 2 of them now, the first kills that they've ever had in air combat. But I don't know if I'd really call it air combat, you know, when you're shooting down like the equivalent of a giant Macy's Thanksgiving Day balloon. But nevertheless, I'm glad they shot it down because I think there's a lot more going on, and I think China's really testing things. And then this article, this is from, some pictures of the sun taken with us, talk about polar vortex. Material from a northern prominence of the sun just broke away from the main filament and is now circulating in a massive polar vortex around the north pole of our star. Implications for understanding the sun's atmospheric dynamics above 55 degrees here cannot be overstated. And the scientists have saw this and they're like, okay, what is that? So we live in this world of the polycrisis where all these things are going to they're converging. Everywhere you look, all these things that everybody is concerned about. Artificial intelligence, what does that mean? How disruptive is it going to be? Are my kids going to have a job in a future? And they're talking about, we're going to get these algorithms. You might remember when I did the first update of 2023, I had the robot hand punching over 2023 that was made out of stone. So look at the new issue of The Economist. You probably should tell them where to send the check, right, for the idea. Chatbots in the battle for search. And everything's a big deal. So then here's more articles about with AI, tech giants finally get to place new bets. And they're talking about how ubiquitous this thing is going to be. Here's the head of Microsoft, Bing, of course. And then, I mean, the good side of this is they're talking about, this is from the Globe and Mail to, I think today or yesterday, in Canada, talking about, hey, they're making a lot of progress on fusion. And if they get the fusion technology miniaturized and safe enough, it could change everything. And it would be pretty positive. It would help us get rid of oil and gas. And they're talking about, I heard a discussion this week about how they could use fusion powered rockets to get to the moon. They could fly a fusion reactor to the moon and to Mars and set up shop there. Because that's the promise of the technology. Now, how soon does it get here? I don't know. They're going to launch a rocket this week. I read that it used to take, to launch something into space, cost about $55,000 per kilogram for every 2.2 pounds, $55,000. This rocket that they're launching, this Starship rocket that I think they're going to launch this week, will drop that to about $4,000 a kilogram. And they think that it will soon, in the next few years, be down to $100 per kilogram. So things change rapidly in this world. Have you noticed that? You know, did it? Oh, that was me. I talked about acceleration for I've been talking about it for a long time. And it's going on so many different levels. And if computing power changes and goes into the quantum area, it's going to change even more. And of course, they never tell you this in the discussions, right? It now costs, it's cheaper to fuel gas-powered cars than electric vehicles now. How's that working for the EV thing? This is an article from the Rare Foundation. It's a libertarian group. The Great Transhumanism Reset, Smart Dust Spying on Your Brain, Human Microchipping. Boy. And that was from February a year ago. That, well, we'll just sprinkle it on your skin and that type of thing. Another thing they talk about, big articles this week about digital identities, and this is what they want to put in place in Canada, and they're talking about it. This is the little flow chart that they have, and they got it from the World Economic Forum. And remember what they want to do at the World Economic Forum. This is Klaus Schwab speaking in, believe 2018 in Chicago at the Council on Global Affairs, and he said this.
And now, the fourth industrial revolution is not just a prolongation of system. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is not just a prolongation of this digitalization. It's much more. It's a combination of technologies. It's not just the digital technology. Just think of genetics, think of brain research, and so on. And the power of the fourth industrial revolution comes from the combination of all those technologies. Actually, I was saying it's at the end what the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
And so this is a speech that was given on February 7th, this week, by, I think he's the deputy governor of the Bank of England, the digital pound. And in that, he talks about how they're making progress. And they're ready to roll it out. And down here, he also says, I've expanded this out, but they're going to limit it. They're going to put a limit of, between 10,000 pounds and 20,000 pounds per individual, which he says is the appropriate balance between managing risk and supporting wide usability of the digital pound. And you've seen that thing from the Bank of International Settlements guy who says, we want to do this because we want to know what you're spending your money on. And there was an article I read that somebody wrote about they're using in Sweden, a lot of people have chips in their hands and they just wave it when they go to pay. But the credit cards are now tracking your carbon footprint. So if you go and buy something and it puts you over your limit, you don't get to buy it. How's that for freedom? And what's the use that's going to be made of that type of technology in the hands of the wrong people? So yeah, I'm one of these Bible prophecy guys. I'm really concerned about where this was heading because I read the end of the book. And it's very, very bad. And it's very, very dark. So, and remember, the one thing that I haven't seen yet, remember Pippa Malmgren at the World Government Summit last year? She said this.
What underpins a world order is always the financial system. What we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. But also, this new money will be sovereign in nature. Most people think that digital money is crypto and private, but what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The US is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that as well. And the question is, will that new system of digital money and digital accounting accommodate the competing needs of the citizens of all these locations so that every human being has a chance to have a better life? Because that's the only measure of whether a world order really serves.
And it's kind of interesting as she's talking there. Look at all the guys in the audience. They're all looking at smartphones. So what happened was, 13 years ago or so when the smartphones first came out? Now they're ubiquitous. I mean, listen, I have mine with me all the time. If I drive off and leave it someplace, I notice. I've done that. I was playing golf and it fell out of the golf cart. And I got to leave and I didn't have my phone. So I got out my iPad, hooked up to the internet, and found out where it was laying out on the golf course. So it's but understand that this chat, so whatever, it's taken 13 years to get here on the phone, it's going to take a year or less to get there on ChatGPT and generative artificial intelligence. It's going to have a huge impact. I don't know the exact impact, okay? I just know that things are going to change, and there's a very dark side to a lot of this that we need to be aware of. Even The Atlantic comes out with an article. Oh, here's this article from this guy. ChatGPT reached 100 million users in 2 months. Google Baird, if fully rolled out, will reach at least 1 billion users. We are witnessing the 2 largest deployments of big neural nets in history, a dance of giants unfolding in real time. Drawn to scale. This is what they compared. ChatGPT is like, everybody's like, it's huge. Look at what Bard is projected to do. And this is the cover of the current Atlantic magazine. And you see what the title of it is? Notes from the Apocalypse. So we'll give the Atlantic this week our guest prophecy updater title. So let me talk briefly about this. And I got some things on the Middle East and the quakes in Turkey and the political earthquakes in Israel. but this was a very good article. I think this Free Press, I think this is Barry Weiss. She's gay, married to a woman, liberal, used to work for the New York Times, but couldn't stand it anymore. She's Jewish. But she had this article out. I thought I was saving trans kids. Now I'm blowing the whistle. And it's talking about this lady who worked for Washington University Transgender Clinic in St. Louis. And she goes this: the center's working assumption was that the earlier you treat kids with gender dysphoria, the more anguish you can prevent later on. This premise was shared by the center's doctors and therapists. Given their expertise, I assume that the abundant evidence backed this consensus. By the way, I don't think I read what this little tweet from Sam Smith, who did that horrible satanic thing at the Grammys. He said this: gotta love CBS openly admitting that they, alongside Sam Smith, worship the devil, because he says, look, we're getting ready. We're doing this thing at the Grammys. And what did CBS on their official account tweet? Now it's been taken down, but somebody captured it. You can say that again, Sam. We are ready to worship. Whoa. If you want to see a good summary of what's been going on at the Grammys for years, go to Good Fight Ministries, and they have a video up that's kind of a recap of all these things. So let me get back to this lady who's talking about what she was doing at the trans clinic at Washington University. So remember, it comes on this. This is what the Atlantic said. All of this news about all these AI things is frankly overwhelming. Microsoft and Google's announcements that follow last summer's public debuts of art AI tools, including DALL-E 2, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion. And people are using this. It's like, I need an illustration about Jesus walking on water. And it's generating pictures and graphics and videos. It's concerning. So anyway, so back to this lady. So she's talking about, I went there, I thought we were doing good. I assumed there was evidence doing this. During the 4 years that I worked at the clinic as a case manager, I was responsible for patient intake and oversight. Around 1,000 distressed young people came through our doors. The majority of them received hormone prescriptions that can have life-altering consequences, including sterility. I left the clinic in November of last year because I could no longer, by the way, she's gay and she's married to a trans man. Okay, so I'm having, okay, but she's disconcerted with what she sees going on. By the time I departed, I was certain that the American medical system is treating those patients is the opposite of the promise we make to do no harm. Instead, we are permanently harming the vulnerable patients in our care. Today, I'm speaking out. I'm doing so knowing how toxic the public conversation is around this highly contentious issue and the ways that my testimony might be misused. I am doing so knowing that I am putting myself at serious personal and professional risk. Almost everyone in my life advised me to keep my head down, but I cannot in good conscience do so because what is happening to scores of children is far more important than my comfort, and what is happening to them is morally and medically appalling. And she goes on to relate some of the things that she saw go on. She cited here's the clinic that works at Washington University in St. Louis. And they look like normal people that run these things, right? But in there's a question they ask, like, what does it mean to be a transgender child? And they give the stock answer. So when this hit the press this week, everybody got upset. So the Washington University came out and said, well, we're looking into this. We're really shocked that some of these things are going on. But then you go to their thing and they tell you what they're doing: hormone therapy and specialty care. Now, they're saying, well, we never did anything for young, but down there it says pediatric adolescent care up to 18. So the Post-Dispatch and Kansas City Star report that the Missouri Attorney General has said, I'm investigating you. He's a good conservative guy. In England right now, there's a big article in the Sunday Times newspaper about Tavistock, about what the things that went on. And I've talked about this in the past, so I won't go into it, but it's very, very troubling what's happening. Couple that with what's going on in Canada. This is from National Review, Canada's Ministry of Death, because that's all acceptable now. And that's Tech Talk from the Times. AI will change all our lives. They give 5 ways that it's going to do it. It's going to change jobs. It's going to be very disruptive. It might have some good things, but it's going to be big changes over the next few years. And everybody loves that robot hand, so go for it. The Times of London editorial today, the Tavistock experience can never be repeated. And I think some people are starting to see like things are really messed. The Los Angeles Times front page yesterday, liberal Portland confronts an identity crisis. As homelessness and crime rise in famously progressive city, solutions are elusive. I saw a conservative Asian guy saying, why do Asians do so well in school? Because we have a dad. Oh, by the way, I got a phone call this week from a political survey. And the political survey, it was about schools and school boards. And do you support, if a child identifies as trans, should they be able to go to school? If a child is bullied, and I finally got a little bit tired of it, I will confess. And she said, well, if the child is bullied, should they be able to choose the school that they go to? And I said, agree strongly, provided the father of the kid goes and beats the tar out of the kid who's bullying his kid. Like, when did that stop? And I mean, she was like, I could hear the shock in her voice on the other end. Well, I didn't really want to get into violence. You were the one who brought up a kid being bullied. Have you seen these videos of these kids being beat on school buses and stuff? There was a kid, I forget where it was, beat a 15-year-old beat a 9-year-old girl unconscious. And he got like 2 days stay after school detention. You're 15, you should go to jail for something like that. What happened to us? And we'll grow worse and worse. That's what the Bible says. This is an interesting story. So there's this Oakland baker. She actually graduated from Ohio State. She bought this bake, and she's a radical leftist. She identifies as an anarchist. She got attacked this week, drugged behind a car for about 100 feet, and she went into the hospital, brain dead. They donated her organs, and she died. So they put up a GoFundMe for Jen Angel, is her name. But listen to what they say here. She's a radical anarchist. She's against the police. So this is what her family put up. As a longtime social movement activist and anarchist, Jen did not believe in state violence, carceral punishment, that means putting people in jail, or incarceration as an effective or just solution to social violence and inequity. The outpouring of support and care for Jen, her family and friends, and the values she held dear is a resounding demonstration of the response to harm that Jen believed in. Community members relying on one another, leading with love, centering the needs of the most vulnerable and not resorting to vengeance and inflicting more harm. If the Oakland Police Department does make an arrest in this case, the family is committed to pursuing all available alternatives to traditional prosecution, such as restorative justice. Jen's family and close friends ask that the media respect this request and carry forward the story of her life with celebration and clarity about the world she aimed to build. Listen, the world she aimed to build will only exist when Jesus Christ returns. this is on one hand incredibly sad. On the other hand, did you ever think it through, Jen? Did it ever occur to you that there are bad people out there? Jen's life do not use her legacy of care and community to further inflame narratives of fear, hatred, and vengeance, nor to advance putting public resources into policing, incarceration, or other state violence to perpetuate cycles of violence that resulted in this tragedy. That sounds like the motto of a lot of prosecutors in these cities today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Middle East and what happened here. So look, there's a lot of things going on in this space right now. We have the Russia-Ukraine thing. I'll talk about that briefly in just a moment. But what you're seeing, and this is what my pastor friend in Ukraine kept emphasizing, is, we talk about who's Magog and who's involved in this Ezekiel 38, 39 thing. He says, listen, it's really easy. Who's aligned with, who really hates Israel more than anybody? Persia, Iran. Who are they aligned with? Who are they providing weapons to? Who's also trying to help them out? Turkey, Israel, Russia. And he says it's pretty easy to figure out who's going to be involved in this thing. And I tend to agree with him. Now, I don't know how far Russia will get, to be honest with you. This is some articles, Ukraine's asking for ammunition from everywhere. Russia's launching military missile strikes all over the place. Ukraine says they shot down 71 of 81 that were, or 61 of 81 that were shot into Ukraine, but as my friend told me, they have no power a lot of the time, no internet. He was able to have it for a couple hours when we talked. So pray for those people over there. They're really, really suffering. It's difficult. So let's talk about this. Earthquakes in Turkey, and they've been felt all over the Middle East. Even some friends of mine in Israel said they felt a couple tremors here over the past couple days. There are a couple plates that were next to each other, and they shifted, so they had a initial quake of 7.8. I heard it got upgraded to 8.1, but I haven't seen that since. And then about 4 or 5 hours later, there was a 7.5 magnitude quake, and then there's dozens and dozens of 4, 5, 6.0 and even a little bit higher quakes. And this has really affected a lot of people. This is Turkey. The quakes in Turkey have affected 16% of the population. Translate that to the United States. If that happened in the United States, that would be almost 50 million people affected in the United States. Whole cities are devastated. Somebody noted this. You look at the quake things, and there was this weird shaped cloud that was over Turkey a couple weeks ago, and somebody was saying, see, this was a sign that it was coming. I'm like, I don't agree with that, but I'm putting it up there just because it's kind of interesting. And so the quakes are pretty bad. The videos and pictures, this is a father. His little daughter had been crushed to death, and he sat there and said he would hold her hand, even though she was dead, until she recovered. A lot of people are really upset with Erdogan. They're saying, oh, it's all his cronies. A lot of these were recently built buildings. I have some pictures here in just a second of what happened. And so people are really, and so Erdogan's in the midst of a campaign. There's supposed to be an election in May. Is this going to affect the political outcome in Turkey? Because, listen, these were really bad earthquakes. I don't know if you can design buildings to not collapse in a 7.5 earthquake, 7.8 earthquake, and afford to build them. I mean, this is clearly a very damaging earthquake, and there's a great graphic in the Times of London today. They've actually started arresting people who built these apartment buildings, And you can see the pictures. The devastation is just unbelievable. Here's a little, this is a good graphic in the Times that kind of shows the depth of the quake and the place affected. It's twice as high as the Himalayas. It's that deep. It's 11 miles deep. So, but look at some of these pictures. These are just, and these are towns that have, or cities that have like 1.5, 1.7 million people in them. And they're destroyed. And so there's a slip fault, and the thing slipped and it caused a lot of trouble. The Ataturk Dam has some cracks in it. This is the road over the Ataturk Dam. A picture, that's the Ataturk Dam on the left. It's the third largest dam in the world. And they've started releasing water out of that, and it's flowing down into Iraq, which helps Iraq because Iraq's been in a major drought. And the rivers that Turkey has dammed up, they're not sending water down there. And so some of the people are losing their jobs and everything that live in the Delta areas in southern Iraq. So it's a big issue, but if these dams collapse, this is horrible. You remember there was the dam north of Mosul in Iraq, and ISIS took it over for a while, and they were concerned. They said this could be a bigger disaster than ISIS. If that dam broke, I think they've shored it up, but there was concerns that the dam would give way and over 1 million people would die. They were saying anywhere from 1 to 3 million people would die. Big article in the New York Times today showing different pictures about how this is one city. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It begins with a K, 1.7 million people. This is an Erdogan mouthpiece, Yeni Safek. The video of just one street in one city in the affected area. And this goes down into Syria, and Russia and Syria have been bombing the Sunni areas down there in Aleppo and other places, and those buildings are collapsing too. We haven't even begun to see the beginning of this. I think the death toll I saw this morning is up to 23,000. This is I think it's safe to say that this is a disaster of biblical proportions. So it affects all the way down into Syria. Even people in Lebanon, the Lebanese newspapers are saying, oh, we're so grateful that we were spared, because if this fault had slipped the right way, Lebanon could have gone away. It's hard for us to grasp this. We're overdue for quakes like this in some places in the United States. In The Economist this week, the scale of the disaster in Turkey and Syria keeps growing. But so how many are going to die? And I've heard, when it was 8,000, I heard it was going to be 20. Now it's 23. When it was 8,000, I also heard people saying 40. I was on radio the other day, I said 100,000. Because you cannot look at the number of the buildings that are destroyed here. And so in The Economist, they say this: some 6,000 buildings, including apartment blocks, such as the ones in Adana, collapsed as a result of the quake. An earthquake expert estimates that 180,000 people or more may be trapped under the rubble, nearly all of them dead. You're going to see people rescued. You see these pictures of little kids being brought out, dogs and that type of thing. I saw a heartbreaking video. You can find them on Telegram channels if you want to look at them. They pulled the dead body out. The father had covered over his son, his young child, and the son survived, but the father was dead. They see they had a wonderful little video of this baby, probably 10, 11 months old. They cleaned it up and the kid's smiling and everything, but her family's gone. Everyone is dead. I mean, it's heartbreaking. This is a disaster, as I said, of biblical proportions. So this is this one city, and the red areas, this is a city of 1.7 million. These are buildings that had collapsed. They've even gone down into there's a soccer stadium, and you see all the white dots in the soccer field. Those are tents and everything set up for refugees. So here's a picture of this town. I have it here in my notes someplace, but I'll fracture it. So this is they took like Google Maps pictures and they tried to show the same view as today. So this is before the quake last year. This is what the same area looks like today. I mean, look at this. Here's another picture. So you see this, there's a white line, that's a hospital there. You see the soccer field, that's a hospital. Okay, the hospital is still standing. Here's what it looks like. And these are all apartment buildings. There's the hospital. So all those apartment buildings collapsed. And there's no warning. The people didn't get out. It happened at night when people are going to be home. As I said, the devastation is not. Here's another one. This is a cultural center. This is from Google Earth. And here's what you can sort of see that arch there with the angle things in this picture. You see it there on the right? Look at this. Well, here. All the buildings, these are all apartment buildings. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe 180,000 is not enough. We've had some really bad earthquakes in the world in the last 20 years that have killed 200, 300,000, 800,000, a million in China about 15 years ago. So it's not unusual, but this is also an area where there's a lot of conflict and war and that type of thing. And it's where some of these countries play a big part in Bible prophecy. So in the distance here in this picture, you see some apartment buildings. They're standing. So this is what it looks like today. All that stuff in between has collapsed. It's unbelievable. What do you do? I mean, I saw a picture of them taking debris off people, and the building collapsed on the workers next door. Did it kill them? I don't know. And this story is repeated tens of thousands of times all across Turkey and Syria this week. Here's another one. Looking down this street, the building there in the center at the end of the street, it's standing, but look what happened to the ones leading up to it. Just heartbreaking. Here's a business district in this city of 1.7 million people. See the sign of the business, Bizum Lokanta. Here's what it looks like now. You can see the sign here. And those are apartments above the stores and that type of thing. It's unbelievable. Here's a picture of this town. This is before the quake, taken from a distance. Here's a kind of high altitude picture taken after. So what's going to happen? Is this going to build Russia up, Syria up? Is Russia going to come in more? Is Turkey going to collapse? Is Erdogan going to go away? They're calling it in Turkey the disaster of the century. By the way, Russia, this is a major bridge in Odessa, Ukraine, taken a little while ago. And here's a video of what they did last night, Russia. They sent a drone boat in there. There's a major transit artery. They blew up the bridge. That's going to affect them. So let me just do one quick thing on Israel. I do a lot of quick things on Israel. But I'll probably do a midweek if I have time this week. I apologize. I was going to do a midweek last week. And then my wife, she goes to the eye doctor. And you here at FBC, you know the story. And if you follow me on Facebook, she appears to have had an allergic reaction or something to the eye drops the doctor gave her to dilate her eyes, pupils. And she felt flushed. He immediately called the squad. They took her by squad. She was having chest pains. Her BP was, PM 220 over 180 for a long. What was it? Oh, 386 over 189? Oh. It's not good. And it was in the 220 over 180 range for like 5 hours. So I was running back and forth and trying to get the car from downtown. Some people at church helped me do that, and going to the Grant ER, which I call Gunshot Central, and you got to go through security, and I have artificial joints, and so I'm getting searched, and they're pulling everything out of my bag and all this stuff. So it's, Dan thought it was great, but it's not the most restful, relaxing place that I've been in, like, ever in my life. So I have a clip of, I have some things to say, but I'll hold them because this dispute's not going anyway, but the political earthquake going on in Israel as the coalition, Netanyahu's coalition, has introduced some judicial reforms. I think I played a clip of Netanyahu last week. I don't think they're that extreme, but boy, everybody's melting down over them. And I don't think I'm overstating it that Israel could end up in civil war over this. I mean, they have 100,000 people protesting last night. And this has been going on for several weeks now. And it doesn't seem that the rhetoric is getting dialed back by anybody. And so you see here, like, for example, front page of Jerusalem Post this morning, they're just below the fold. National security minister is becoming a growing liability. That's Ben-Gvir. And the template is the same template that are used in the United States. If you're right wing or conservative and religious, they've got a template to come after you. They're doing it here. They're doing it in that big country down south of that the equator goes through, south of the United States, and another named continent. I won't say it because they're censoring people. And they're doing it in Israel now too. And they're going to do it in some of the other countries in Europe that elect populist people. But this is what, here we are yesterday. 2 young brothers and a newlywed were killed in a Jerusalem terror attack. This would be north of, like, the old city, a few miles. I think it's called the Ramat Junction. A car ran over them. They were at a bus stop. 2 little boys, 6 and 8, crushed by this guy. They shot and killed him. That happened in Oakland. The family would say, well, please don't do anything to this kid, this poor kid who did this. He got, my opinion, he got justice quick and with the proper measure. He was neutralized. By the way, here's the guy who did it. I think this is the guy. Maybe this is the guy who shot the synagogue up on Shabbat a week ago. Look at who he has a picture of. This is the Red-Green Alliance, Islam, communism, socialism, Marxism. They're all joined together. On Palestinian media, after the shooting at that synagogue, this was circulating on Palestinian social media. Eating the head of one of the Orthodox Jews killed in that attack. So this is what they're dealing with. This is a big, big problem over there. Anti-Semitism is rising. By the way, these are the 2 little boys that were killed in the attack. I think it was Friday afternoon. So my midweek update, I'm not going to do it, will include some stuff about underground air base revealed by Iran this week. New missiles revealed by Iran, one of which has in Hebrew written on the missile, "Death to Israel." You can tell where they're coming from. and then we'll talk about the politics. And it's a very interesting time to be alive. I do not know. I don't see this thing turning around. That's my personal opinion. So we're going to have to learn to deal with it. And it's weird because we know all this is going on, yet our lives in many respects are kind of normal. While Russia's threatening to nuke us. I mean, it's... and God may be ready to judge us. What's the old saying? If he doesn't do something about what we let go on. And I'm pretty confident halftime of the big Super Bowl tonight will not be something that good Christians should watch. I think I'm pretty safe in saying that. So listen, God has us. This is part of his plan. And you might want to listen to Pablo and me on Serpents and Doves on Wednesday, or when it's available on YouTube and Rumble, because we're going to talk about some of these things with AI and that type of thing, because it's just, as we text back and forth as we're getting ready for this, it's like, this is crazy, this is insane. I can't believe this is happening. And one person in our conversation says, I'm not even sure that this stuff doesn't exceed what the technology that's even identified in Revelation is going to happen. This stuff has gone beyond that. So interesting time. So let's pray. Lord, thanks for your word. Thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to be saved by your grace through faith in Jesus Christ, and to live at an exciting time when we can see all of these things coming together and getting ready to be fulfilled just as the Bible said. So pray that you will help us to always keep that in mind, that you are in control, and always to keep in mind that we should live our lives as people of faith, and that we should live with the attitude that whatever happens to us, that our lives will glorify you in everything that we do. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.